The Queen is facing calls to issue a formal apology to residential school survivors. Métis National Council President Cassidy Caron says she plans to ask Prince Charles at the Rideau Hall reception tonight. That's not too far from right now. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked earlier whether he thinks the Queen should apologize. Have a listen to his reply.
This trip for the royal family, for His Royal Highness, is an opportunity to hear directly from Canadians, and climate change and reconciliation are key parts of their visit. He will hear directly from Indigenous peoples, and we recognize as a government that reconciliation is about not just a government versus Indigenous people, but everyone. Indigenous, non-Indigenous institutions have their role to play as well.
Terry Teegee is the BC Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief. He's with us tonight from Prince George. Hi, Chief Teegee. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Hello. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. More importantly, how are you? And just on that central question of whether the Crown, whether it be the Prince or the Queen, should apologize for the Crown's role in residential schools. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, I think, what began as colonization is part of the issue with assimilation in residential schools. And I need to remind everybody that what was created, especially now as we've seen the apology from the Pope in the last couple of months and the commitments to come here to Canada on Canadian soil to do an apology here, is that there was many hundreds of years ago a papal bull that was brought forward by many countries, Britain, France, to colonize North America and Africa. And much of those decisions were made by the Crown. And there's certainly a lot of, with colonization becomes for Indigenous peoples was complete genocide. And I think there's a lot of culpability upon the Crown and amongst all other institutions that were part of really the colonization of what we call Canada.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that, people may not realize that the Crown's role, like, for example, in some of the treaties or the proclamations that essentially established the relationship that predated a lot of the things that came after it. What would you tell Canadians watching tonight, people watching tonight about that?
Well, there is many relationships, such as historical treaties with the Crown, but also the fact that during the time of colonization, much of what was imposed on Indigenous peoples was genocidal policies, including assimilation. So that really needs to be dealt with, and where that came from was from the originators of colonization, if you will, from the countries such as Britain, France, and Spain, and who colonized the Americas, North America, South America, and Africa, is the fact that as they came here for more resources, was what was imposed on Indigenous peoples is complete genocide, and that's what needs to be understood is the truth. And the truth telling about pre-contact was that many Indigenous peoples had their own governance systems, had their own ways of knowing and being, and govern themselves, and what was really, I suppose, traditional to their First Nations and or Indigenous ways of knowing for many hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Do you think that has been adequately recognized by the Crown, by someone like Prince Charles, by the Queen? So even putting aside, for example, like a formal apology, just the recognition of the culpability in what you just laid out, like has there been any of that to you, like from your perspective?
Well, no, I don't think there has been, because quite simply, there has, without colonization, there wouldn't have, there wouldn't be imposed genocidal policies such as a residential school system. So I think what was imposed on Indigenous peoples and for many hundreds of years was and originated from Britain, and they called this place, a colony. They call us a part of the Commonwealth, which originated from the British colony. So I think there's certainly a lot of culpability in terms of not just in terms of residential school policies that were imposed by church, state, and police, But further to that was, the Crown's access to lands here in what we call Canada and United States and North America came from the British Crown. And certainly there needs to be definitely some set of not only apology, but some sort of commitment towards Indigenous peoples to right past wrongs.
Yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to ask you. Like, what would a recognition of that culpability look like? And beyond just a recognition, like, what more has to follow?
Well, I think, what has to follow is a lot of these apologies will ring hollow if there is no actions behind it. And what was taken from Indigenous peoples, our lands, our language, our culture. So, from the British Crown and more recently with the Vatican and the Pope and the Catholic Church and perhaps even the Anglican Church is that the necessary resources so we can reinvigorate our languages, come back to and recognize the true history of Canada, the true history of North America. And really, I think, they recreate this, I suppose, a space that is more, more in terms of reconciliation and how we deal with reconciliation is that ability to create that space where we can discuss important matters, not only with the British Crown, but the British Crown really putting, Canada and this country on notice and then how to deal with Indigenous peoples and live up to perhaps past treaties and perhaps, going forward with, really a space that we can make our own decisions and that we can have our own ability to make a better place in what we call Canada, especially now that the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples is federal laws. So I think this is an important time in our history that there can be true reconciliation. Otherwise, whether it's an apology from Prince Charles or for the Pope, a lot of it will ring hollow without a concrete action.
Okay, Chief Teegee, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Terry Teegee is the BC Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.